it's official, guys. We're being visited by aliens. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm taking notes because I want to know when their closest approach to Earth is, because you know that's when they're coming to beam all us up. Us. That's between you and me. I'm just kidding. Let's find out what we can about this new interstellar object. Now we first of all, thanks to oh shit, I just forgot your name. Thanks to your name's Orbital Resonance. I don't know why I was about to call you Random Observer. That's weird. You were the person who drew my attention to this new interstellar object. I'm not really one to browse new news, is that a thing, very often, so yeah, it's really cool. I, obviously love your comments pertaining to my videos, but I also love you guys. Kind of are my, certainly a source of information for me, so I appreciate you, man. And I assume you're a male because you have a picture of Carl Sagan as your profile thing, which is super cool. So let's get into this interstellar visitor, number 2 in 2 years. The last one was Oumuamua. Oumuamua. Oumuamua was a interstellar object we observed in 2017. We're much more technologically advanced, especially in the past 50 years or so, than we have been in all of history for hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of years. So we might have been, these might be a regular occurrence in the last million years or so. They might be natural objects, but there was, with the Oumuamua, the brass tacks of it all was the reason it piqued the interest of many actual scientists, astronomers, cosmologists, was because its acceleration was higher than could be accounted for by our current understanding of celestial mechanics. And that was, of course, par for speculation. It's an object we clearly know by that super cool introductory graphic I'm sure I'm going to put in there. If this is the plane of the solar system here, this object wasn't orbiting or even coming from anywhere near along the plane. It was kind of just coming directly from above and shooting out through the bottom. If there is a bottom again, it's all relative in space. It was just fascinating because it was clearly not from our solar system. It was traveling really fast, and it had this really interesting oblong, cigar or pencil-like shape. Of course, immediately any science fiction fans made the connection with Rendezvous with Rama, this huge cylindrical spaceship. I mean, miles long, like 20 miles long. It was wide enough to have its own atmosphere on the inside, and when it's rotating in that sort of manner, you can imagine like those Gravitron 3000 things at a local fair. Actually makes it so that you can walk on the inside, and it can be, manually adjusted to simulate Earth levels of gravity. So that's that object, and this one is another one that's come, I think, from a very similar trajectory. It was discovered by a man named Borisov. Let's get correct information here. Borisov. The object formally is named C/2019 space Q4 Borisov. Borisov in honor of Gennady Borisov, an astronomer, I was going to say amateur, with the Crimean Astrophysical Observatory, who first detected the object on August 30th, just a couple weeks ago. NASA's Scout system, which monitors newly discovered asteroids and comets, as part of the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies, abbreviated CNEOs. So whenever you hear NEO, that's near Earth object, and without reference to the matrix at least. And it indicated that it had an unusual orbit shortly thereafter, so it confirmed it. And let's check out this hyperbolic orbit of the comet. Credit ESA and NEOCC. So with this object, it's moving pretty fast, as well as, you know, similar to the Oumuamua of 2017. And back then, you know, scientists, like I said, the acceleration was unable to be accounted for. So it could have been, you know, a natural object just aimlessly wandering and captured by the sun's gravity, but it was propelled in a manner and on a trajectory with an acceleration that was more than solely our sun would be able to impart on it. So we thought maybe, the more speculative scientists thought maybe it might have been a solar sail, which you could imagine. I always say that, don't I? It works just like a spacecraft with large reflective sails that capture the momentum of light emitted from the sun to propel the spacecraft forward. So it's just, it's so fascinating because, you know, I'm a firm believer that there's definitely other life out there. I guess the real question is whether it's intelligent life. But when you consider the sheer number of stars, I mean, just obviously we can't reach, without some metaphysical method of propulsion or locomotion, we can't reach other galaxies, but within our own galaxy we certainly can. And with the billions of stars we have in our galaxy and the millions of years, you know, billions, but at least millions of years that most of the current stars have been fully formed with exoplanets, you know, planets around it, inhabitable zones, it's almost unlikely that there isn't some form of intelligent life. And so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to start trying to speculate, you know, that other, at least probes, if not objects with actual, you know, piloted by actual other beings, no doubt they would be other probes, but maybe that's just us anthropomorphizing natural objects. So that's why I really enjoy speculating about this, because, you know, the possibility isn't so remote as some people would imagine. So a few days after all these people started looking at this thing, famed astronomer Marco Micheli from the ESA, European Space Agency's Near-Earth Object Center, he started looking at it and conducted several measurements on the object's position in using data provided by the Canada, France, Hawaii telescope. That's great. These people are so coordinated. In Mauna Kea, Hawaii, the ESA is now analyzing available data and planning more observations. That didn't tell us anything, did it? But it does say Micheli explained that, you know, he, as a scientist, he doesn't want to make speculations. So he is going to not put his foot in his mouth. He's not going to say anything that he doesn't have sufficient evidence to support at the moment. He says he wants to really pin down the origin with more observations that will either prove the current thesis that it is interstellar. So that's currently only a thesis based on the about 40 degree, it'd be easier to see, angle of inclination towards from the ecliptic, which is the plane that most planets orbit on. So that kind of two-dimensional plane, you know. This thing isn't coming from, I guess most comets and other objects orbiting our sun lie within a reasonable variation of that plane. This one is coming from a pretty steep angle, so that's the first big tip. And then, of course, the acceleration, once they are able to track the motion of it and the future trajectory of it more clearly, they're going to be able to determine whether it's truly interstellar, if it's, I guess, by narrowing out the possibilities of it being in a stable orbit around the sun. Currently, it looks like it has a hyperbolic orbit, which from your high school math, you should remember those are open ellipses. Ellipses that don't have a, I guess, what is it? The foci are like outside of the ellipse, or maybe the other foci out of the two is at like an infinite distance. So normal ellipse has, you guys can see that. So a normal ellipse has two foci right there. A circle is where the foci are on top of one another, superimposed. So it's a perfect, there are all points on the perimeter of the circle are equidistant from the foci. And I believe a hyperbola is, or hyperbolic orbit is an open ellipse in the sense that the other foci is infinitely far away. So it doesn't really have a closed orbit. But it's the part that does wrap around the one foci, which would be our sun, I believe, is predictable based on these hyperbolic equations that we know about. Math, in other words, does predict the orbit with the gravitational forces of the sun as far as we know. At this point, what is known is that C219Q4 Borisov is a relatively large and active comet that measures a few kilometers in diameter. It's expected to make its closest approach, or perihelion, to the sun in early December, reaching a distance of about 186 million miles, which is roughly about twice the distance as we are from the sun on average. This distance will place it outside of Mars's orbit, which means technically it's not a near-Earth object, but it's not going to stop us from looking at it. It's actually going to be in the solar system for a long time, or its trip, rather, through the solar system won't be brief, so we'll have plenty of time to look at it. Let's see. Looks like the object will peak in brightness in mid-December of 2019 and continue to be observable with moderate-sized telescopes until April of 2020. After that, it will only be observable with larger professional telescopes all the way through October of 2020. So they think it's just going to go back, right back into interstellar outer space. So December 8th, 2019 is its perihelion, or closest approach to the sun. The comet's current velocity is actually pretty high. It's at 93,000 miles an hour, which is well above the typical velocities of objects orbiting the sun at that distance. We can maybe imagine if it was 45, maybe 60 to 70,000 miles an hour or something like that. Entered the ecliptic plane at roughly a 40-degree angle It was established as being a cometary due to its fuzzy appearance, which generally indicates gaseous, kind of an envelope surrounding it. Generally, comets have a central icy body that's producing a surrounding cloud of dust and particles. As it approaches the sun, of course, that heats up, and then once it gets, was it close to, Mars? I don't know exactly when it generally starts outgassing, but once it hits the inner solar system, passing within the boundary of Jupiter's orbit, generally outgassing occurs, and that is exactly what it sounds like. But the crazy part is, the interesting part about Oumuamua was that it didn't outgas. It wasn't observed to be again, there's a couple things that just added up to make it really interesting. Among its speed and steep approaching angle was the lack of outgassing. It wasn't like typical comets that have frozen barrier of ice and other solids, frozen solids that encompass it when it's far enough, and that heat up and expel away from it, very visibly and observably. It didn't have any barrier. So that was pretty cool that, this thing didn't have any ice on it, which either meant, I guess, it was ridiculously old, or it was just kind of an anomaly to astronomers as far as we knew. So right now, it looks like, although it might be interstellar, it actually appears to have that outer coating of ice. Observations completed by Karen Meach and her team at the University of Hawaii indicate the comet nucleus is somewhere between 1.2 and 10 miles in diameter. Astronomers will continue to collect observations to further characterize the comet's physical properties, size and rotation, and general trajectory as well. So over here on Universe Today, it's interesting what outlets, what information they choose to share and speculate on, and what information they just kind of don't worry about. So assuming C2019 Q4 is a comet, it will begin to outgas once it reaches the closest approach to the sun. All the frozen volatiles, water, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, will sublimate and be released. Astronomers will be able to confirm then that the object actually is a comet, based on the halo or tail that will result. So right now, I guess, they'll be able to, when they do that, especially when it's lit up, they'll be able to analyze it spectroscopically, and they'll be able to determine based on the emission lines of the certain wavelengths of light that are either absorbed or emitted when interacting with light. They'll be able to determine the chemical composition and see whether it looks drastically foreign or fits a pre-existing category of what comets generally fall into. So I guess right now that's all to say that we actually don't know whether it's a comet or not. I was under the impression reading, the other one I was reading was the jpl.nasa.gov article. What's it titled? Newly discovered comet is likely interstellar visitor. So it's likely they're reaching out to speculate on that. So because it's going to be within about 2 AUs, astronomical units, from the sun, they expect outgassing, because generally anything that comes within 3 AUs, or about 270 million, right? That's 9 times 3 million miles, because we're 93 million miles from the sun. Anything within that generally starts to outgas. Anything outside of that, generally, as far as comets go, stays cold enough not to produce a tail, comet tail from gas. And this is where Oumuamua started actually confounding scientists because it didn't outgas. It, despite reaching a distance of a really close distance, because it was actually within the orbit of Mercury, I believe. So 38 million kilometers, or 23 million miles from the sun. That's ridiculously close, and it didn't outgas at all. So that's another thing, again, that was really, really interesting. It managed to accelerate in Oumuamua. Now, it came in, and I'm sure I'll show you a nice schematic or diagram, but so there's Earth, Mars, and then way out here. So here, and the inside here, Oumuamua came in. If this is Mercury, Earth, or Venus, Earth, Mars, and way out here it's gonna be Jupiter. Oumuamua came in ridiculously close, and they think this C2019 is going to be a little bit further away, you know, twice the distance from the sun as Earth is. So Oumuamua is really something new, and that's what's so fascinating about it. It's just, it wasn't consistent with any other previously observed comets. Of course, we've only been looking at comets in this much detail, you know, maybe 40 years now, maybe, I don't know. But Oumuamua definitely was leading a lot of scientists to consider it being of artificial origin, or at the very least a celestial object that we've never encountered yet. And this is what makes interstellar objects such a prize to win. It's almost the essence of science, is discovering new things, new phenomena. So it's little wonder why scientists are excited for another interstellar visitor. It's also why many are looking at low-cost, rapid deployment concepts for spacecraft that could actually rendezvous with and investigate the object. So again, that's a little nod to Rendezvous with Rama, which I would highly recommend you guys read if you are into science fiction like that. It's a really cool concept. I really enjoyed it, and it was exactly about that interstellar spaceship, without even giving anything away, because there were a lot of deeper, more complex concepts in the book. The basic premise was that an interstellar, clearly artificial object, not natural object, was coming through the system, and they noticed its change in acceleration to slow down. So obviously right away they knew it wasn't natural, and so I guess humans in the book were advanced enough to be able to go rendezvous with it, and the craft, I forget why it was the connection with Indian, the Indian nation, but they called it Rama, based on a famous Indian name, and they rendezvoused with it, went inside of it, discovered that it was very inhabitable and very, oddly hospitable to human existence, to the point where it had an atmosphere that was perfectly attuned to what humans would need. And come to find out, well, I don't want to spoil it, I guess, from there, but that's the basic premise, is that they get on this ship, and the book is an exploration of what this thing could be, and what the purpose of it might be, and what the cost of interacting with it might be as well. So So in a few years, if we happen to have another visitor, the ESA, European Space Agency's Comet Interceptor, is a mission that is specifically designed to link up with some of these interstellar, odd angle approaching objects. The mission is part of a cosmic vision program. The ESA's long-term vision for space exploration that includes fast-class missions capable of rendezvousing with transient phenomena like comets. The Comet Interceptor proposal inspired by Oumuamua. So this is, it's so interesting what sets things in motion, like what if they are aliens and they are definitely making calculated flybys of our solar system. They're like, oh, okay, well, when we do it, they had an idea that maybe they would accelerate certain aspects of our exploration of space if they piqued our interest, because they know, hey, we are curious by nature. So maybe they're playing chess, playing the long game with us. The Comet Interceptors, inspired by Oumuamua, envisions 3 spacecraft that will be the first to visit a comet or interstellar object as it begins making its way into the inner solar system. In any case, should further observations show that C2019 Q4 is indeed interstellar in its origin, it'll mean that our solar system has been visited by at least 2 interstellar objects within as many years. And so, if they're not artificial, it would at least also indicate that these types of objects are a lot more common than we would also have thought. Trying to look on Business Insider now to see if they might have got any better scoop. Interestingly, another name for the C2019 Q4 Borisov comet is GB 00234 00234. So I guess, if we're being scientists about this, we got to consider, I'll do an update video. I just wanted to make a video about this because it's just something I really enjoy speculating about. And, now more than ever, with every increasing year, it's more likely that we're going to be visited, and more likely that we're going to be able to observe any visitors, any faraway visitors coming at us. With the first radio projection into outer space, radio waves, maybe they might be too dim for our distant stars, but nearby stars, they might have picked up, 50 years ago, some of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s broadcasts into space. And, maybe nuclear explosions make certain waves and pulses that instruments specifically designed to perceive, it may have picked up. So who knows? I think the possibilities are limitless on this one. Overall, yeah, we could be this vulnerable creature calling out into the dark jungle, waiting to be preyed upon, or we could evolve into and hopefully make contact with a benevolent species that has, at a certain point, put an irrational aggression and tribalism behind them, or at least sublimated it within themselves. And I think that's probably the more likely approach, is that people just wised up and were able to cultivate societies and cultures with people that have much more self-control, where self-discipline and self-knowledge is the standard rather than the rare exception as it is on Earth. So this is exciting. We're looking at yet again, within 2 years, just such a short time span too in between visits. It's pretty cool. I mean, if it's genuinely an artificial object being sent to probe and as a reconnaissance mission, it's more than just exciting. That's like paradigm shifting. It's on the order with a religious, spiritual, revelatory significance. Because the day we find out that we're not the only intelligent beings or, the only life in the universe, I think it's going to be a big wake-up call. And me personally, I think the internet is the first prototypes, the first inklings of a human brain as one. The dynamics and complexities of the interactions of billions of different individuals to make ideas and memes and movements swell and sway and ebb and flow and emerge out of seeming chaos it's something we have to study, but it's also indicative of our values as a species on Earth. I mean, how we treat each other, what news we pay attention to, what bullshit we're able to filter out, because there's a lot of it we gotta wade through being on the internet. And most importantly, I would say what responsibilities each of us are willing to take on that we previously didn't have the knowledge of requiring. I mean, the fact that we are so much more connected with all the atrocities and all the evil that's going on in the world nowadays more than ever, whereas it's just a constantly incoming stream of, if we want to, we can shut it off if we want, but of news from everywhere in the world, most places at least, that aren't under a government firewall, lockdown. It's a responsibility to, for everybody, each drop in the bucket, to make that water crystal clear, or, some cesspool that none of us want to live in. So, I think it's we're in the midst of a turning point, just like the French Revolution and, or at least on a broader scale, the Enlightenment or the Renaissance. They didn't call it that when they were in it, but now, looking back from a couple hundred years in the future, we can recognize there were certain undercurrents, certain pivotal people that, propelled civilization as a whole in certain directions. So this is just one of the many things that, makes me very interested and, very hopeful that, we're not just aimlessly, nihilistically floating in this universe waiting to die. It's like, we have no idea what's out there. We have no idea what the fundamental substrate of the universe is, how life originated on Earth, or how complex life even started manifesting itself. We have no idea, where morality came from. We're still figuring ourselves out. We need to take a mirror up, and it's to ourselves in a way. That's what the internet does, and that's what something like this would be a wake-up call to do, certainly. Look at ourselves and say, wow, what does a truly alien being observe looking down on Earth? As Carl Sagan takes that view, as he often did. It was such a brilliant move on his part. When the Voyager spacecraft was passing past Saturn, he had them turn their thrusters on and reposition the spacecraft, so rotate it, reorient it, so that it looked back at Earth from Saturn. And what he saw was a pale blue dot. And he has this beautiful thing that I'm sure a lot of you might have heard, but to crudely, poorly paraphrase it, it was saying that everything that had ever happened on Earth, all the evil, all the bloodshed, all the revelations, all the miracles, all the every life, all the people we worship, all the people we resent and revile, all the beauty, everything has happened on that pale little speck in this, only a couple pixels wide, in this panoramic from behind the rings of Saturn. And it was beautiful. It was a very sobering moment to look at ourselves from that perspective. And I don't know why this is turning into a huge speech. So I just get really jacked up about these things. I really enjoy learning about these new things, and I'm excited about where this is going. And even if this isn't an interstellar object from other intelligent life, it's just one step towards knowing that much more about the universe, the dark, infinite vastness outside our little campfire in the forest, that we call the universe. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did. It was a little more off the cuff than I wanted it to be, but hopefully I can edit it down and make it a little more intelligible. Our second interstellar visitor in as many years. So let me know what you think about it, or if you have any more information about it. Definitely let me know. And so, needless to say, I'm pretty pumped about this. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys sleep well. Hope you have a great tomorrow. I'll see you next time.
is all about, is understanding reality and what the world is doing. It's not just about making predictions. Making predictions is good, but we do that, mostly because we're curious about what the world is doing.
Well, for people outside the world of academia, when I read someone like you saying that you were discouraged from pursuing this, and you were literally told that you should be pursuing your work in cosmology and gravitation, that's where it's at.
That's serious work, yeah.
That seems to me be so crazy. It's like, if anybody should be pursuing it, it should be people like you.
I want to be fair. So, of course, 20th century physics was incredibly successful, and there was part of the attitude was, look, we have to understand nuclear physics and particle physics. And, a lot of it was the center of physics shifted from Europe to the U.S., and Europe is much more philosophical and you're willing to think about the deep ideas, and Americans are pretty pragmatic and want to build things, right? In particular, at the time, they wanted to build nuclear weapons. And so the idea of just really putting aside deep philosophical issues and putting stuff to work was attractive. And the other issue is, okay, let's say we do demand that we understand quantum mechanics better. How do you do it? Like, what experiment is it there that you can do? As far as we know, the cookbook that we have, even though we don't understand it, works pretty well. Like, what could you type into your smartphone that would help you understand what's going on inside? It's kind of hard to figure out. So I think that those attitudes were wrong, but at least, they're not completely crazy. It's not just that they were afraid of the truth or anything like that. And I also think that it is finally changing now. I think that there's slowly, more people are appreciating that understanding quantum mechanics is important.
Well, what do you attribute that to?
A couple of things. One is, there's good news and bad news. Part of the good news is technology has gotten better, so we're trying to build quantum computers, for example. And guess what? Some of the ad hoc rules that we had for doing quantum mechanics might not be up to the task. We need to understand the details a little bit better. The other sadder thing is that so much of fundamental physics is kind of stuck right now, right? We literally have not been surprised by a new experimental result in fundamental physics since the 1970s. There's one exception to that, which is the universe accelerating in 1998, which was the dark energy. We've had amazing accomplishments in experimental and observational physics. We found the Higgs boson, we found the top quark, we found gravitational waves, the microwave background, many, many things. But they were all predicted decades ago, right? So progress is driven by